Experience IT, and welcome to our last session here of the day. Also wanted to point out that we had all of these wonderful sponsors for the admin workshop day and the Minnesota M365 group. So user group. So thanks again to all of those sponsors for making days like this possible. As we mentioned, it is not just me today. We also have Nash Pherson from Microsoft and Jeff Godderz from the Metropolitan Council or Met Council. And I am Kris Shulze from MNIT Services for the state of Minnesota. And let's see, Nash and Jeff, did you want to go through and introduce yourselves also?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Kris. My name is Jeff Godderz. I am an enterprise content management architect at the Metropolitan Council. I'm responsible for Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, a lot of the collaborative technologies and user adoption related to those, as well as project management, business analysis, Power Apps, Power Automate type of things. We've been with the council for 8 years and very excited on our journey in Office 365.
And again, I am Kris Shulze, Experience IT Program Manager with the state of Minnesota, and I focus on user adoption and user experience for our enterprise technology services for 38,000 state employees. So, and Nash, take it away.
Yeah, I'm Nash Pherson. I'm a Modern Workplace Customer Success Manager, focusing on Microsoft state and local business. I'm based here in Minnesota, and have spent a lot of my career focused on working with the state of Minnesota, either as an employee of the state or as a consultant for the state, or now on the Microsoft side of the house. But really excited to be talking to this group to see and hear Kris and Jeff share the story of the types of things they were able to help their organizations pull off. Should we just dive right into it, Kris?
Well, I think we should just dive right into it, right? Because it's Friday and it is the last session of the day. I am going to quickly put this little poll. We want to make sure that we are using Microsoft 365 tools and technologies during our session today. So I just posted a link to a Tell Us About You poll that you are welcome to go fill out. Or you can use your phone to grab that QR code off of our presentation slide. Just basically, where do you work? Does your organization still use Skype? How long has your organization been using Teams, and what's your organizational maturity with user adoption of Teams? And I am going to move this over to this. Mm-hmm.
Honestly, leave the QR code up just for a little bit here, so we can get people to keep doing the form, because we'll use the survey responses to kind of ask more questions of the audience and tailor some of the story here. Just knowing where you're at in this journey will be useful. I'm going to just kick this off and preface our session today with setting the scene, right? So in January and February of 2020, it was becoming increasingly apparent that COVID was going to be hitting the United States. Microsoft had significant business operations in China and was learning lessons in their initial spike of what this was going to look like on the ground. And starting in early January, folks on the state and local government team, we were starting to engage with our customers on, should this continue to go the way it's going? These are the things you can be doing today to be ready. And while I live in Minnesota and I love focusing on Minnesota, I cover a lot of states in the Midwest. I'm going to tell you that different government organizations had different responses, right? I cover North and South Dakota, and there were completely different approaches on how these things go. Here in Minnesota, between the different cities and counties and the many, many different state organizations, very different strategies. And I can tell you that some organizations were completely ready for this. So I think we got our first lockdown in March. The state employees went home March. Kris, do you remember the date?
I believe it was around March 15th
Mm-hmm.
that we were totally home.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you that there were state organizations, there were government organizations. This was a non-event, right? Hennepin County had a full-blown response plan already half executed before the governor's shutdown happened. Um, but there are other organizations that didn't have near as good of a plan. But the places that we saw be the most successful focused on the business outcomes that they needed to deliver. They did not approach this as a technology program or a technology project, but instead were sometimes for the first time being faced with a clear and present business need. And in the government space, it was an existential threat. Right now, we have a business that requires being at home, or sorry, being at the office. Our entire ability to go and deliver government services assumes that there is a place to go and do that. And we know that we won't be able to do that very soon if we do not change. And while other industries go through lots and lots of transformations as things move about, a clear impetus for digital transformation like that, so broad in the state and local government space, I don't think it's ever happened before. We saw a lot of organizations do 2 or 3 years worth of work in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, right? Was it all perfect? No, it was very much an iterative process, but they were able to go and get monumental things done. As we're going to go through the story today, you're going to hear Kris talking about the executive branch in Minnesota, where the state of Minnesota does have a centralized IT service known as MNIT. However, each agency still has their own mission, and they even do still have some IT staff that are part of MNIT but focused on each of those agencies. And so while Kris is responsible for the whole, the actual execution is on the individual agency level. And so even within her story at the state, you'll hear some organizations did huge transformation right away, and a year or 14 months later, they're not ever looking back. Other organizations went a lot slower in that process. Jeff, I think, is going to have a more homogenous story with Met Council. But even there were still certain business areas where they were less ripe for digital transformation. But this is it, right? We had an existential need to change in order to be able to provide continuity of government services. One of the key focal points of that was the modern workplace solutions that pretty much every government organization in the state of Minnesota, state, local, city, state, counties and cities have is Microsoft 365. Teams lives at the center of Microsoft 365. It's the lens with which people experience it. And especially as we're doing remote collaboration, it's definitely the thing people are living in all day. So it ended up being a lot of the focus of this. We learned a lot along the way. Some of our lessons learned were not surprises, right? The M365 service adoption framework is built on 10 years of longitudinal research from McKinsey and almost 25 years of longitudinal research from ProSci about how to do organizational change management. We know, as we are able to compare even within the same organization in subgroups, if we had great sponsorship from the business, if we communicated from business leaders instead of IT, if we engaged field staff through a champions program, and we had a training plan that was focused on business outcomes, that we had tremendous success. And we know in the places where we didn't do those things, that we ended up not being nearly as successful. They weren't failures. We missed out on some of the opportunity. It's fine. It's an iterative process. We can always go back and do it. But we want to share these lessons learned with you. I've talked for all of 9 minutes now, and I'm hoping that for the rest of the time, we can actually just go and tell the stories and get people to do some Q&A things. Before we launch into this, let's just quick look here. The majority of the folks on this call are coming from the public sector. Either, I assume if they put public sector, they're working in government, and if they put nonprofit, they're working in a nonprofit. We got 5 people on the call coming from private sector organizations. For the journey they're on, like for this, hey, you got to get Teams out there. It looks like the majority of folks already are completely over to Teams. That's great. We know Skype for Business Online is going away in July. So if you're still on Skype for Business Online, we want to get you cut over as soon as possible. Most of the organizations that are doing this Teams thing just started in the past year. And yeah, we had 8 that were well on the road before COVID. But there are still a couple that are just starting out now. And I assume it was Ted who said, what is Teams? That's my guess. For organizational maturity, right? I don't know how much Dunning-Kruger is in here of, the more you know about something, the more you know it's complicated. But we've got a couple people who feel like they've got a very healthy, mature organization, lots of rock stars who are getting tons of business value out of the things that they own. And then, the rest of us are either in the, hey, we're working on it, we're iterating and growing. And then some others where we've got some pockets that are doing great and then some pockets that we know aren't. And then we want to know, do you have a champions program and is it working? We know that we've seen over and over again that while working with executive sponsorship is incredibly important, working with champions and going out organically and laterally through organizations is just as important. And absent one, you can be successful with the other. So I know Kris's Champions program at the state of Minnesota has been copied by at least 5 other states, right? They just took what she was doing and like, let's do that. So we're going to go and try to find all of the best success stories from both the executive branch in Minnesota and from the Met Council, and tell you the places where we ran into roadblocks and ran into things where if we could do it over again, we'd do differently. Kris is going to go first, and then it's Jeff. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and we'll all be trying to watch that and go and talk through all these things.
Right. Thanks, Nash. So just wanted to describe the picture on this slide for folks. It's a sign that I took a picture of on a walk last year on, I'm in the White Bear area. So White Bear Lake posted signs in all of their parks and all kinds of public spaces saying no bear hugs. And there's a picture of 2 bears 6 feet apart. So just had to share my little local Minnesota piece on trying to keep us all safe this year. So working from home, this was my initial work from home setup. I am somebody who loves to stand and work because that way I stay awake while I'm working. And there's no chance of falling asleep at your desk if you are standing up, hopefully. And there were a lot of hours put in, especially in these early days of COVID, where I know a lot of us were putting in a ton of extra hours just to make sure that we were able to continue doing the work that we needed to do from home. So anyway, you'll notice in this picture, I have my laptop, my monitor from home, and my lovely mug from my niece is a potter. So I always am drinking out of my niece's mugs. And I was lucky enough to have just bought that big box of Kleenex from Costco right before our shutdown, before all of the paper and toilet paper products were disappearing off the shelves. So it became a great standing desk. So March 2020, this was the week before we were all sent home. We had a Teams meetup on March 10th, where we were practicing Teams live events. You'll notice my whiteboard at my desk. I had Teams user adoption plans for rolling out some new training sessions that we were partnering with Microsoft instructors from the Microsoft store to come in and train groups of around 20 people and how to use Microsoft Teams and modern workplace concepts, and working on a lot of projects. We had just finished up the Teams pilot in 2019. So as part of that pilot, we had started building, or I had started building the champions team. So we had a champions team site that included all of the pilot participants. And towards the end of 2020 and end of 2019 and early 2020, we had several agencies that had opted in and started using Microsoft Teams. And once that started happening, I opened up the champions team to be a public team, and was really trying to grow and nurture that team and those relationships. And again, we were just starting to kick off those training sessions. You'll notice I have a small little plant here down in the corner of this whiteboard that's about two square Post-its tall. That will come back later in the session. So anyway, so that was my workspace. And then practically overnight, we were working from home. And so as far as that, the state employees and the stay-at-home orders, many of the folks, and actually, I think we're actually at 38,000 employees now, but I still had 35,000. I'm going to have to fix that. Many of those 38,000 employees were not equipped to work from home. They needed routers, they needed laptops, they didn't know how to VPN in, or they had not set up Microsoft MFA. Some were used to Skype, others were used to using WebEx. Teams was very new to agencies. And really within a matter of, I would say, months, we had almost 38,000 employees enabled to use Teams. So some of the challenges in this is, when people think of government, being flexible and adapting to change rapidly may not be the first thing that they think of. Within a week or two of our work from home orders, we had formed a collaboration Tiger team to make sure that all of our state employees knew how to use collaboration and conferencing technology, because a lot of folks were just thrown into it. We made a decision amongst that collaboration Tiger team that we were going to focus on Teams adoption as more and more agencies were opting into using Teams. And we were not going to provide additional training for how to use Skype, because Skype was going to be going away. So within 6 weeks, we had held more than 50 training sessions with the help of our Microsoft Store instructors. And now no longer Microsoft Store. So now I think we just say Microsoft instructors, and trained nearly 8,000 attendees. So that helped facilitate that rapid adoption of collaboration and conferencing tools for 63% of our state workforce who've now found themselves teleworking. So part of this effort and the collaboration Tiger team, we were able to enlist some additional resources from our communications team and our enterprise project management team to help make sure we had updated documentation, which a lot of it had kind of fallen out of date. We were able to start communicating the resources and training opportunities, and those in-person instructor-led training sessions that I had scheduled for late March, early April turned into virtual online live events where we were able to train hundreds of employees at one time instead of, 15 to 20 people in a room. Another thing that happened during this time is, and probably one of our challenges with the state, is that we have 70 agencies, boards, and commissions in one tenant. All of them have differing operational challenges, different missions, different business goals, different tolerance for risk, different data practices, policies, and different organizational cultures. So many were used to using Skype, and they wanted Teams to be just like Skype. They wanted to send instant messages and have online meetings. And then all of a sudden, here's Teams, it's a collaboration platform, and it is not Skype. So this was a huge culture shift for how many of our state employees were used to working. So my goal and what I was doing in Experience IT was trying to help people envision a more modern workplace where they can use Teams and all of the tools that come along with Teams and the applications that come along with Teams to do more than send chat messages and have online meetings. We wanted to make sure that they knew how they could use Teams also to effectively collaborate and just be more productive, be able to more easily connect, keep doing the work that they needed to do when our world kind of turned upside down. A number of agencies we had mentioned had opted in early to Teams, and that transition, and then later that year, we also had a transition from Skype project that brought along the remaining agencies. So some of those got started early in the spring and early in the summer. Some of our larger agencies actually just turned Teams on in the fall. So it was kind of that whole summer into the fall, and by I think the end of December, early January, all state employees were on Teams. So I'm going to call that a matter of months. So
The majority of state agencies were online for a matter of months. I think at the very end, I think it was just 3 state agencies that held on. So we got there.
So, and I don't know if I mentioned also that I am a one-person team. Did I mention that?
Nope.
Okay. I'm a one-person team. So I, you know, the nice part of this is that we had started a lot of this work as part of the pilot. And a lot of these approaches that I use to drive user adoption for the state is built upon those best practices for change management. So hopefully we're focusing on the why to use Teams throughout any of the training sessions or office hours that we're having. We're trying to build in the real life work scenarios, things that are familiar to state agencies and scenarios that make sense. Early on, we had to make sure that some of our trainers were being sure to use the government community cloud and the GCC tenant, and also tried to get them some examples. And Nash, you did a great job at making sure that some of the trainers who were more used to doing training sessions for corporate environment can make that shift to things like parks, roads, some of the work we're doing in government instead of like sales related types of things or sales or marketing. So the other thing too is I wanted to make sure that we have multiple formats to accommodate different learning styles. And my background is more as an educator and in innovation kinds of programs. So I want to make sure that we are really kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible and how we can use these tools to inspire like change and innovation, but also making sure that we're reaching people where they're at, as far as having training sessions spanning from getting started with teams to running effective meetings to sessions for owners and team owners, and then also having a active champions team and building and nurturing that champions team. And that is a lot of hands-on work early in the beginning. And I'm sure the folks who are on right now and who are active in the champions team know that there's still a lot of mentions of me on that, but there, through the course of this past year, there are a ton of other folks who are jumping in and answering those questions. So that makes my one-person team part be much more manageable because we have a whole big group of us who are Teams enthusiasts and are ready to jump in and answer people's questions. And also those are questions that hopefully are not having to go to a service desk. When people are able to ask questions on a champions team or in office hours, hopefully they're getting the information that we're able to get them working quickly and they're, preventing a service desk ticket. So also another piece of this is learning pathways, which I'm sure those of you who've been on earlier sessions today have heard about learning pathways. This picture up in the upper right is a picture of our learning pathways site where we have some of the resources for getting started with Teams, more of the resources for Microsoft 365 training, and all of our training events and meetups are in an events schedule there, so people can easily download them to their calendar. And then just actually end of December, we added the Learn app into Teams, so people can just stay within Teams, find all of this helpful, useful information, at least I hope it is. I also have news posts that I post on that area too. So, and then I also post our training session recordings on a Microsoft Stream channel also, which is connected with our Learning Pathways site also. And then along with that, we have a very active collab and conferencing subject matter expert team. And this is a team that we run with Mike, one of my co-worker service managers from MNIT. Mike and Carrie are instrumental in keeping our collab efforts alive and happening. So also a lot of consulting and white glove service during this time. And these were the pieces where we had folks who all of a sudden always had in-person public meetings who now needed to have public meetings virtually. And this is also a great spot where Nash was able to come in and help out some of these organizations who needed to shift to Teams live events or to have a Teams meeting and stream it live to YouTube. We kind of evolved that process as we went. So again, just all of these approaches involve iterating and trying something and learning and growing from that. So again, so what I had mentioned, I'm a one-person user adoption, user experience team. But without the dedicated staff, the main way I champion change and drive adoption is to partner and connect with others. So again, leveraging the Microsoft Store trainers for those training sessions, partnering with Jeff from Met Council and Nash from Microsoft for help with those office hours, for the one-to-one consulting and the assistance with boards and agencies, collaborating with our Minute service managers, Mike and Carrie, to keep the work of our collab team going. Our Tiger team efforts lasted for 6 weeks, but we've been continuing that work over the course of this year. And then the key piece of this is connecting with those champions and tech liaisons at agencies and through the champions team, and also just simply being responsive and getting back to people as quickly as possible when they reach out and continuing to foster those connections. And that's how I hear about success stories also, so that I can bring those and share them with other folks or have them share with one another. And then the other piece of this too is just learning from the larger community. I've been going to SharePoint Saturdays for years. We started doing shout outs at SharePoint Saturdays to find all of the state employees who were there because we didn't always know who we were. And I'm still reaching out to a lot of those folks to help draw them in to keep building our community of tech enthusiasts and being able to support one another in this work. So a year later, this is my little teeny tiny plant that I had at work that actually was Carrie's plant, but I took it home with me to try to save it. And now it's blooming, it's much bigger. So I have a proper sit-stand desk now at home, and I brought my monitors from work, so I have a much better setup, still the same mug. But our team's use at the state of Minnesota has grown exponentially over this past year. We've had over 200 collab training sessions and office hours with over 13,000 attendees. And even more, over 4,300 folks have viewed the recorded training sessions. And then we currently, as of today, have over 2,340 Champions team members and hopefully pretty active, 190 posts with 500 replies in the past 90 days. Hopefully those are tickets that aren't being entered in the service desk. But even more than that, it's a whole lot of people who are continuing to learn and grow in what they're doing. And then learning pathways with that Learn app on the Teams left navigation, which went live in December, thanks to our Microsoft 365 operations team, has had over 10,500 unique viewers with over 54,550 visits since its launch. So a lot of information shared and a lot of great work, and thanks to all of the folks who are on our call today who are there to help support and help drive that work at their agencies too. So
do we want to answer or ask questions about your story first before we do Jeff's story? We're at 3:02. Jeff, how do you want to handle it?
I'm fine with going or ask pausing for some questions. It's up to you. I think there was a question in here that was who made up your champions team at a high level, mostly all leaders, or were they, individual staff or?
Yeah. And that is a fantastic question. So initially the champions team started off with folks who were part of the team's pilot. A lot of those the initial folks were MNIT staff, more of the technology folks. And then as more and more pilot teams were added from agencies, continued to get more of what we call the business side folks onto our champions team. As we opened up for general availability, I made it a public team. So then in a lot of our earlier training sessions, once the shutdown happened, or not shut down, that's other stuff. Our work from home started, then we kept promoting the champions team too. So initially with our work from home, a lot of folks just kept joining the team because it was one place they could go to get answers. And it was a place to go where they could just ask quick questions. They could get their answers and go on their way. I think one of the tricky pieces with Government Community Cloud is, sure, a lot of folks can go out and Google something or go to Microsoft's site. That's going to be giving information and instructions for kind of the commercial version of Teams. And at the state of Minnesota, we have the Government Community Cloud, which may not have all of the features that are currently available in the commercial version. And then also through governance decisions, we may not have all of the features just because we've made governance decisions that we do, that we're not allowing something yet. So for right now, the state of Minnesota, we don't have the whiteboard. But that's a GCC thing. We want whiteboard. and we also have agencies that are, have many different governance decisions they've made as far as data retention policies and data practices concerns. And so there are slightly different flavors of teams at many different places within the state, which makes it really complicated. But at least in the champions team, people can go ask a question. We can try to get agency specific responses.
Well, and I think one of the lessons that ended up getting learned there was, especially for the agencies that were making their own governance decisions, getting them to clearly document what they were changing and why they were changing and where their employees could give feedback on it. So I know, Alicia from DNR helped get that set up for DNR. So if we're doing anything that is going to impact that Google search result, where people are expecting it to work one way and we've decided to make it not work that way, have a discoverable place ahead of time for them to find that. And that, the champions community will be the people who will help keep you honest on it, because they're the people who will keep running into the new thing, and will share feedback with you to keep that stuff up to date.
Yeah. And some of our agencies have kind of have made their own kind of smaller champions team, or ask me about teams. So that also has kind of fit that need for making sure that agency staff have the governance and the information and knowledge they need for using teams at their specific agency. So any other questions there? Should we turn it over to Jeff?
Let's turn it over to Jeff. We can always circle back.
So. And Jeff, just tell me when you want me to change the slide.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you, Kris.
Yep.
I'll try to do Kris's presentation skill justice here. She's a pro, so pressure's on me. So this was my desk before we went work from home. I think I took it a couple days before we actually received the order to work from home. We started, I believe, March 12th was our order to work from home. I'm obviously researching the policies of criminal justice information here on my screen. That was a big thing at the moment. Obviously, we did take care of it, but that's where I was at. I still have that calendar on my desk at work. I'm very excited to go back and see what I missed from my magical unicorn calendar. So when we started, there was a lot of discussions the week before we were told to work from home, and we have a tool that we had been working on learning for governance, which is a third-party tool called AvePoint Cloud Governance. And we needed to get that tool up and running very quickly to allow people to create teams because of some policy decisions our divisions have created. In case you're not familiar with the Metropolitan Council, we are made up of 5 different divisions: Metro Transit, Environmental Services, Community Development, Metropolitan Transportation Services. Yes, they're different than Metro Transit, so the Metmo buses aren't part of the same part of the company, and then Regional Administration. So one of those areas really needed a way to approve creation of teams, so we implemented governance over the weekend. It took us about 12 hours on a Saturday, and that was when we got the heads up that Walls was going to create the work from home order at that point. And we got a little bit of an early heads up, so that's what we did. And then Monday it came around, and we were work from home from that point. So this really is what my desk looks like at work right now. Probably a lot more dusty, but that's what it looks like. Except for the earpiece there, because that's in my ear right now. So what we had done is we had implemented Teams in July 2019. That was also the same point and same date that we were migrating from SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint Online. So my administration staff and my users have gone through a significant amount of change starting in July 2019. We've entered in an environment where we're not fully in control of the change that happens to it, the things rolled out to us. So we had to ramp up a lot of adoption activities and get people prepared to do that. We were running in Skype for Business and Teams. Most people were using Skype for Business for chat and using WebEx for meetings. And so there's been a big culture shift that's occurred, and we've had to recognize that and address that, and be patient and do a lot of teaching and training and retraining, and a lot of presentation and a lot of white glove service to get there. So my team is called the Collaborative Business Solutions team. So we implemented the governance and the team's creation process. We're also implementing other processes as we speak. Our initial focus was on the user adoption of teams. So getting our division, or getting the pieces set up in order to let people be people within teams. We went from less than 100 teams. So we had it implemented for, was that 7 months before we went work from home, and we had 100 teams at that point, and we went to 400 teams in 2 weeks after that. Right now we're over 800 teams in our organization of 35 500 people, and a lot of those are bus operators and train operators, so they're not really using Teams that much. We've spent hundreds of hours consulting and training and on communication. Our primary methods of communicating are organization-wide communication. We have a intranet site which provides a lot of new information. We also set up, like in the prior session, the gentleman was talking about paying attention to the roadmap. We had set up a Power Automate to read the Microsoft roadmap and then post anytime anything changes in the government community cloud section for our end users to then go see that in our champions team. So it's all automatic because it's too difficult to keep up with as an individual, right? So if you're checking that every day, I mean, that can be an hour, 2 hours worth of work every day.
You want the next slide, don't you? Okay.
Yeah. My mouth is dry. I must be nervous. Sorry about that. So learning opportunities. Well, first of all, there's my coworker, Mojo. He hangs out with me during the day and participates in phone calls, as I'm sure a lot of your pets do. But that's my buddy. So we have a Microsoft 365 champions team. We made a channel for each of the softwares my particular team supports, and people go in there, ask questions, much like Kris's team. It's not quite as well utilized as Kris's team because she's a rock star at that stuff. I can only hope to do as well as her one day, but it does get used. People do post things there. We also had a home office help team that our IS department as a whole set up. We found that a lot of folks weren't ready to work from home. They weren't technically capable of setting up their equipment in a way where they could actually work and accomplish the things that they're being asked of. And our organization needs to support that. And we're not used to supporting people from home. I mean, it's always been hands off, right? You bought the equipment you bought. I don't know what that means, but now we have to try at least, right? We have to try to answer the questions. We have to try to help people figure out their networking issues, their modems, restart their routers when they're slow or when a Teams meeting is slow or they're dropping, provide technical support in a lot broader way. So the home office help team contained a channel for Teams, as well as many, many different other aspects of working from home. And that receives quite a bit of usage. It's less active today, but that was our olive branch, not olive branch, but our lifeline to the business to help them accomplish working from home, and we've been extremely successful at it since that point. So, internet resources, of course, we have internet pages about all this information. We tend to reference Microsoft material. We do not have the learning pathways site yet. I am working on that. I should have that up in about a month. And then communications in our daily COVID emails from leadership. So at the beginning, our regional administrator would send emails out to the entire organization talking about COVID. So what I did is I worked on a daily communication to put information in there. This is where you can get training. This is how you use Teams. Or this is where you can get help with it. This is who you can contact to get help if you're struggling in those daily communications, to be able to really try to reach people who are struggling, right? Because we know that there's a lot of attention in that. So that was a really nice thing that we were able to get from our leadership, is to be able to put some of these technology things into the emergency communication system. And our communications team was fantastic at helping with that as well. Consulting and white glove service. So just like Kris, I've had countless meetings. My team has had countless meetings and countless presentations with departments, continued consultation throughout this whole process with all areas of the business, from Metro Transit Police to some areas within environmental services and parks, all sorts of different areas. So we try to provide the best support that we can provide to support this organization, so then they can support you in the community. That's our goal at the end of the day, is servicing our community and ensuring that we can do our work so that way you can do your work. So, next slide. So overall, Teams has grown over 10,000%. I'm including chat in their adoption. meetings, those types of things. Audio conferencing we've implemented, so people can call in on a phone if they need to. We have implemented private channels in our teams, and then we are working on guest access right now, scheduled to roll out probably a little bit later this month, or next month. Sorry, this is the last day of April. So, and then Skype is gone. We were able to get off of the Skype juice in August this year. So we're very proud of that. It was a difficult project to do, especially in this environment of working from home, because we are taking away, a collaborative resource that people are used to in the middle of a pandemic. But we were successful with removing the Skype for Business and then adopting Teams in that process. So with Kris, I think a great story between us and why we know each other is we've collaborated on these training sessions where we've utilized each other as resources for training sessions, which Nash's team has provided both of us, and they do a fantastic job. I can't say enough great things about those professionals. They're just amazing in all respects of the word. But Kris and I, we started working together to try to leverage each other to provide more resources for our organization. And it's important to understand that not everybody's going to take training. And when you're a smaller organization like mine, sometimes the resources don't come as easy. So when you partner with a larger organization like the state, it gives me the ability to provide a lot more to my team than I probably would have on my own. So I think together we're better than we are individually. And I've really appreciated Kris's support and help with that. This picture here is my current desk where I am sitting right now. It is an absolute mess, but I thought about cleaning it before taking this picture, but then I decided, no, this is people's reality right now, right? I'm going to leave the Play-Doh up there. I'm going to leave the book that I've always meant to read there. I got the Mountain Dew in my water bottle. This is real life, right? Next slide. So the challenges that we faced, I believe this is a shared slide, right, Kris?
Yeah, this is a shared slide. So,
Okay.
and I just have to say, this is, I mean, the fun part about, if there's a fun part about this year, is that I have gotten to expand my team. So it is great to be able to bounce ideas off of Jeff and Nash, and then also my internal folks, Mike and Carrie and all of the champions. I know I've got a couple folks who are tuning in right now, and I won't call out your names, but you know who you are. But that piece of it, on being able to kind of check in, see how things are going, and just also being able to work with the Microsoft instructors too, to come up with new ideas of what kinds of training can we offer, and how can we keep moving people forward on their paths to using more of the features within Teams. I mean, that part is fantastically fun. So anyway, challenges. Nash, were you going to start with the leadership and communication challenges? Jeff just ended with a great example of that leadership support they had in those, in your daily newsletters, to be able to
I was going to come
really
off mute and highlight that one even more. Yep. So
Mhm.
the little snippets that Jeff made sure went into the organization-wide email coming from the chief executive of the organization, they got read. They got read, and like you literally in organizations, if half of the org gets the IT email and the other half of the org gets it from their division or bureau chief, the one that comes from the business gets read. IT emails, if they do get read, aren't read in the context of, or with the expectation that there's something that's going to help you get your job done. It's just usually announcing something that might complicate your job. And the way we communicate those changes really does matter. If it's done with us versus to us, whole different ballgame. And as I was working with the different business areas throughout Met Council, it was pretty universal. Everybody understood why this was being done. They understood what was in it for them. And that's a a really big thing by itself, but they also knew like how they were being supported, how they could get help, how they could learn more. So there was very little resistance because of that style of communication. On Kris's side, some departments communicated like that. Other departments did not. And you could see, you still can probably see in their usage and adoption stuff, if you were to go look at the analytics, the ones that communicated this way probably have a lot higher usage than the ones that communicated in the other way. So the leadership piece, if you do look at that service adoption framework, there's a reason there is so much emphasis on building the business stakeholders and the business sponsorship. It's because we've got 25 years of organizational research, that organizational change management research, that says that is a key differentiator between highly successful changes and everything else. So spend the time on it. I'll throw a link in chat to the intro training and a little info on that. But really just hats off to Jeff for making sure that that happened really well for Met Council. That was a key differentiator that I think led to their level of success.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nash. And I couldn't agree more. Having communication support and the regional administrator support on that was a vital thing. And you know, I'd say almost leadership in that communication is probably the top thing that should be done when it comes to this organizational change. But I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the data practices and governance side and policies in the government community cloud. So there's a lot of different settings and things that different agencies have. There's different laws governing government content and how we need to make sure that that's available, scalable and findable and reportable, right? There's the Minnesota Data Practices Act, which basically the Freedom of Information Act, but for the state of Minnesota. So somebody could put in a request to us and say, I'd like to know what Jeff is doing with teams, right? So then that comes to my data practices officer. They do an advanced e-discovery, they find that content and they provide it out. Now this is really good, and we need to provide transparency to the communities we support and pay us to do what we do to provide the value to the Twin Cities, and 100% support that. There's also kind of a reasonability risk management component here too, from a content management perspective. You need to implement things like retention or deletion policies in chat and in Teams. So we worked very hard and came to an organization-wide conclusion that we would implement a 6-month retention on Teams chat, and then a 3-year retention on, pardon me, it's on chat, it's 6 months, and then within a team post or channels, it is 3 years. So we worked hard to come to a consensus as an organization to implement something like that, to manage the content that we have in a reasonable way, while still being able to provide the clarity or transparency that the community should and deserve to know about us. So, governance is a very important aspect when you're looking at implementing Teams or any type of software. How are you going to manage it? How are you going to keep up with change? How are you going to do the project to implement new features, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we implemented SharePoint Online at the same time we implemented Teams. The only thing we were online for at that point was Exchange with email, right? We just bought into a giant change fest, right? We have limited resources. We're kind of learning this on the fly. That was a lesson learned for us. It was a lot to take on. We're still working through it, but we're a lot more comfortable with it. So keep that in mind. How are you going to change as a administrative unit and keep up with it is a very important aspect of this. Next is feature disparities. There are some commercial people in here and some nonprofit. I'm not sure if there's any education or not, but government community cloud is kind of a unique thing onto its own. It requires Microsoft to develop things on the side for us. I wouldn't say on the side, but different people have to develop the tool for us than in the commercial side. Basically, they have to rebuild it and then provide it to us by people who have specific certifications for their ability to support government in the United States. So we don't get things as fast as commercial. Our end users see things in commercial. There's training pieces out there about commercial things, right? Or really cool features, or polling, or whiteboard, as Kris mentioned. I can tell you my organizations are really begging for that. But in government community cloud, it's about being more patient. It's about working with your partners like Nash and saying, when you kind of think this is going to come, it's not always clear. So you have to kind of be comfortable with that ambiguity. You also have to be comfortable with explaining to your end users why you're in the environment you're in, and being okay with that ambiguity. It is something to work through. It's not always comfortable, but it is a lesson learned, and it relates directly to that flexibility and adapt to change rapidly concepts below.
Well, and I think too, on the feature disparities, I mean, just having our own training sessions that we're hosting along with the Microsoft trainers are using the government community cloud. So we know that the things that we're demoing are things that we have. And if not, we're able to, Jeff and I are always in all of these training sessions, also are able to do a quick shout out saying, Jeff's area has guest access, state of Minnesota doesn't, or soon to have guest access for Jeff's area and Met Council. So just kind of knowing that, I do my best to kind of point people towards training that's geared towards government community cloud, or making sure that we're getting those responses to people in our champions team or on the learning pathways, that this may look a little different, or if you're going to external sessions, they may be focusing on the commercial environment where we may not have all of those features. So, and then next was the modern workplace culture change. And I talked to this a little bit earlier, but we're kind of, in this past year, we've kind of come from an environment where people are very used to working with their network drives and emailing folks, and we have kind of asked a whole lot of people to start using OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams and messaging and online meetings, and try to kind of make that shift away from email for some of those internal conversations and have them on a channel in their teams. So, I mean, that's some huge culture change right there, along with the fact that we've all been working from home. So that's just been a huge culture change, a monumentally huge culture change for many of us also. So that piece has been a challenge, along with those organizational challenges that we've kind of talked to also, as far as we're supporting, I think, around 70-ish different agencies, boards, and commissions. They all have slightly different environments and organizational cultures and norms that teams, for some, was just a natural move, and for others, it's really hard. So somehow we have to kind of acknowledge that and figure out what pieces will work well for them to help them keep moving forward with using some of these tools. Anybody else want to talk about being flexible and adapting to change rapidly? Because that is a challenge for large organizations. So
yeah, I'll just point out, I mean, the prior presenter to the session really talked really good about that. Yeah, he mentioned pay attention to those blogs, pay attention to the Twitter feeds, pay attention to the roadmap. Those things are going to help you adapt to the change when you need to set up a planner board, or soon to be tasks if you're GCC, with the roadmap or with the message center items getting posted in there. Keep track of those things. Take a look at those. Spend a little bit of time reading them each day. It's really important, so that way you can adapt and identify things that are changing soon so they don't catch you off guard.
Right.
There's always going to be something that catches you off guard, though, and you always just have to kind of give yourself a break there when that happens. Be okay with it.
Yeah, and I will always try to be as sensitive as I can to the IT organization that's used to the way things used to work, where change happened slow and it was big and it was all at once, and usually on a 3 to 4 year cycle. That doesn't work anymore. People expect change to happen literally every day. And as soon as we make that transition from the way it used to be to realizing that, grandma can still send a text message, even though Apple updates this thing every week, and the world didn't stop turning, life gets better. Now, there are risks that you want to control in that process. That's fine. But this is the way that works, and that culture change of getting the value out of being able to take advantage of things without waiting 3 or 4 years in the process makes it end up being worthwhile. And especially if you're coming at this from the IT point of view, your users will go around you if you can't do this, right? If they can swipe a credit card on the internet and have a brand new solution up and running today, why on earth would they go and spend 3 years and a fortune working with a group that's probably not going to deliver them exactly what they wanted? Mm-hmm. They'll just go around. We can do both. We can manage and mitigate risk while still making sure things go forward. And really, it's a transition from project-based change to program-based change, where a project has a start and an end, and you can forget about it afterwards. But a program is an iterative process. It's just a loop all the time. We know it's coming. It's not a surprise. If you're in an organization that doesn't keep Windows 10 up to date, there are 2 releases every year. You know exactly how long they're supported for. There's a cycle and a model to this modern piece that is predictable, where it shouldn't surprise us that the new things are coming, that the old things are going away. But it does require to go through a culture change to get there. And the organizations that are trying to work in this world where the change is constant and iterative and can't keep up with it, find that they've got giant iterative changes that they still have to do. They've still got to do all that work, but they don't get the time benefit of that effort, right? There are people who missed out on 2 years worth of value. You still had to do all of that work. So that's soapbox though.
So in spite or probably because of those challenges, that's always that opportunity for us to keep exploring and trying to find the things that are working well. And there were a lot of things that worked, I think, reasonably well over this past year. I was really grateful that we had a lot of user adoption strategies in place for Microsoft Teams. I love Rima Reyes had come in and worked with us early on during the pilot, and with her help, I was able to build out that Champions Team site really well, and I've tweaked it here and there as we've gone along, but it's still basically that same basic framework, and I'm using that same framework again as we're getting closer now for a Power Platform proof of concept, and continuing to build out that same kind of champions program for this different kind of tool set from as far as Power Platform and Power BI, Power Apps and Power Automate as we get closer to having those available at the state of Minnesota. So that piece was really, I was very grateful for that part, that we had that also, already in progress. We were able to just grow it exponentially within a span of several months. The focus on business and user outcomes, I'm going to pass that one over to you, Jeff. I think that's one that we have more of those pockets at the state of Minnesota who have really, those agencies who have kind of gone in and really focused on the business and user outcomes, and those are those agencies that are doing really well. And And I think you have a lot more examples on that too.
Sure. Understanding, what it is that your business needs to accomplish. Understand that they're people, they're not machines, and showing them that they can still be people while utilizing the software are definitely things to focus on, and for business outcomes, for the organization to collaborate, still accomplish great things for the community, accomplish great things for themselves. So focusing on what the people need versus what IT needs, I think, are incredibly important aspects. A lot of this takes change from the old mindset of IT controls everything in this box. Well, empowering the end user to then control their own resources can really liberate their ability to innovate and accomplish things. And it can actually take a lot of strain off of your IT department as well, because the more that you empower the end user to do something, the more that they can learn about it and support it themselves, as well as keep them away from doing things like shadow IT or dark IT, right? We don't want them going off to Google Drive because we don't have any visibility or control over that. We want them in OneDrive, right? So the more you empower your end user and the more control you give them, the more they're going to stay in your environment and the more visibility to the content and control you have over that content. So focusing on the user and believing in them and promoting them is an incredibly important aspect, and has served us well. We do still have some rings to go in that process at the council, and I think everywhere does. But over time, as IT leadership and IT support gets used to that feeling of letting the end user have more control, then more and more they're embracing it because they see the value in it.
And that power of champions piece also, again, I'm just going to drag this over here real quick, but, our champions team, this is where I'm able to kind of get that information out as far as, asking questions, tips and tricks, learning opportunities. I also have our videos posted here. So I have multiple places where people can get to the information they need. I tend to always make sure that every week, and thanks to somebody who's on the session today, I make sure like towards the end of each week, I am posting all of the upcoming training sessions. As we mentioned earlier, some of that communications piece is one of our challenges. And when you're the state where all of the different agencies, boards, and commissions have their own communications folks, and then we have MNIT, who is communicating more of the kind of organizational wide, enterprise wide kinds of email notifications to folks. I don't have a really great way to communicate upcoming training sessions to folks. A lot of that is getting them to know that they can click on that learn button on the side of their teams right here to pull up those training schedules. And in doing that piece, I don't have kind of an email blast or a Teams blast or a communicator apps blast that I can get out to everybody to let them know that we have all of these training events coming up. I just have to kind of keep building that through word of mouth, and also continuing to do the posts in Yammer and in our champions team. So anyway, those champions, they're the ones who keep spreading the word and sharing these sessions and reaching out to their coworkers and stuff like that too. So that part is fantastic. Training with a purpose, again, having those Microsoft trainers come in, and we keep always talking about our one of our trainers right now has the greatest voice. Jeff and I just sit and listen all hour, and he's awesome. And anyway, so we're continuing to kind of take those training sessions and come up with plans that hopefully keep bringing in new folks and also providing new opportunities for folks who have already gone through kind of our regular series of courses so that we have kind of focused topics that people can come to. But it's that, I think it's our office hours where we really come up with some great questions that we wouldn't think of otherwise. And those are fantastic. And then also people will just reach out and ask me questions and either email me or chat questions to me. And those are great sources for posts in our champions team with quick instructions and quick tips of how to do something. So lots of different opportunities there. Showed off the learning pathways, getting that icon on the app right within Teams has been fantastic.
And if I
Leadership
jump real
support,
quick
you got
in-
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to jump back to that training with a purpose thing.
Yes.
A lot of folks on this training may not have the same level of support we have from Microsoft with the state and at the Met Council. I just want to point out that the live training is available for anybody. There's was it Success with Teams, Nash, where you can sign up to take those live trainings.
Success.
Nash will
I
look it up
know.
and we can move forward.
Yeah, I'll get some links in chat.
Yeah, it's the instructor-led sessions. That's what we
Yeah.
started off with our champions team when we were still on the pilot. We would preview those sessions and see how they work.
Yeah, so I just wanted to call out that opportunity exists for everybody, regardless of your working relationship with Microsoft. So thanks, Kris. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you can do the leadership support one.
Leadership support. Leadership support is vital. I did have leadership support in my communication aspect of that. However, as time goes on and as implementation goes on, and prior to COVID, that I didn't necessarily have that component all the time. And we're in the section of what worked well, and it definitely did work well from a leadership, from a communication standpoint when it really, really mattered, right? And it matters all the time, but we're in an emergency situation when we're going to work from home and you're sending, Kris, you're sending 30,000 people home. I'm sending home 4,000. For us in the technology we support, that is an emergency. It doesn't get any more dire than that in trying to get people to work from home. And getting that support in that process and getting your managers on board and supporting you in the change that has to occur. And in my experience with being the project manager that implemented Teams, getting through some of those more difficult doors. Somebody had put in chat a question about procurement. Those doors can be very, very difficult. And to have your manager on board and your director on board with what you're trying to do can be a very big asset in helping navigate those challenging waters. I'm never going to say it was a political situation. I don't think any political situations always exist. Actually, it's more about a point of view and trying to understand and come together for a purpose. But they're still challenging nonetheless, and you need a manager, somebody at that level at times to support you, pat you on the back and say, this isn't the hill today, or maybe this is the hill today, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna take the hill. So, but yeah, thank you. That's leadership support.
So, and then we also, Nash is the one who connected Jeff and I. So thank you, Nash. By connecting with other partners and enthusiasts to learn and share ideas, again, that's at several different levels. One is, we were able to connect with Hennepin County and North Dakota and Met Council and Nash is kind of the glue that brings us all together and introduces us. And I mean, just having that sounding board also to either share ideas or to commiserate. I noticed somebody had mentioned in the chat that we're seeming really confident and comfortable with all of this. We've had our share of being able to like try not to scream or something, or banging our heads against the wall because we wanted to see something happen, but it wasn't happening, or our share of frustrations in getting to this point also, and probably still a fair share of frustrations moving forward. But again, it's that piece of figuring out some of those folks you can partner with to maximize what you're doing. Again, you know, I was a one-person team coming into this. I am still a one-person team for the most part. I keep begging for more people to like staff. It's anything to help keep driving this work. But it, you know, we just do what we can. We iterate, we keep moving forward, and keep coming back the next day to see what we can keep improving on and doing better.
I want to drive that point home, right? I have seen this over and over and over again, both public sector and private sector, giant organizations and tiny organizations. If we get held up waiting for perfect, this never gets done. Someone will always have a concern. We will always want to do better at it, but we have to move forward. Figure out the point where you're just going to arbitrarily say, fine, we're going to move. We're not going to wait any longer. We've got a date. We're going to do the best we can. Like, honestly, just set a date, like, and then set the next date and just keep doing those iterations, right? The whole idea of an agile organization is about doing those different cycles, but come back to the things you skipped. Do not forget them. Like, think of Jeff's last slide. A bunch of those things were not there on launch day. Jeff made sure that they came back and got that stuff done. And yeah, it was oftentimes like these 3 different groups needed to get in a room and just have it out. Kris is still working on the list of feedback that they had from the pilot 2 years ago. We're still, 3/4 of that. We're still fighting the good fight on it. It does not all have to be perfect on day one. In fact, it is not going to be perfect on day one. If that is your strategy, you think you're going to have all of this stuff figured out before you go and put this in front of employees, you are doing it wrong. And I've got 25 years worth of research that says don't do it that way, because you will guess at what this stuff needs to look at and make decisions that are just way off. No one knows their business areas deep enough to be able to gaze into the crystal ball and know how this should all be configured. Use that crawl, walk, run approach in that service adoption framework, and make sure that at the transition from crawl to walk and walk to run, you do have really big heart-to-hearts on what can we get done in this phase. But even once you're at the run, that's a program. What do we do next? What do we do better? What do we need to go back and clean up? Those iterations are where this gets to be really, really valuable to the business area. I'm going to tell you, in the government space, there are a lot of things that didn't exist when people started this, right? Like in January of last year, I think is when we first got third-party apps in Teams. A lot of government organizations didn't even notice that because they were too busy preparing for COVID. And so that's kind of a big topic is, oh yeah, now we got to go back and figure that stuff out. And once they get that figured out, there's going to be another thing to figure out. We're hoping that when we figure those things out, we're realizing that this is a program. Let's go and set the guidelines for how we make these decisions so that when the next thing comes up, we're not all going and, man, we need to come up with a way we're going to solve this problem and make this decision. No, we're just going to go and do it like we did the last one, right? A security review, a compliance review, how are we going to find stakeholders? How are we going to communicate? If you've written that plan from scratch twice, we're wasting time. We should be iterating on the one plan we already built. Love this soapbox. It makes me very happy. I'm going to say we're 350 right now. We've got some good questions coming into chat.
Yeah, I got one right here from Ted. I'm not sure who it was directed at, but I'll read it, and one of us can take it. You sound so confident and comfortable now, being that this change was less of a choice and somewhat accelerated change due to COVID. How concerned were you heading in? Were you always so confident? I guess I can start with that. No, I thought that Teams, when I implemented it in July 2019, was Skype. that was just the next iteration, right? You went from Link to Skype, and now Skype to Teams. Okay, got it. You know, I am a SharePoint guy by heart. That's where I got my start. I love it. But now obviously my world is significantly larger than it used to be. But no, I wasn't always confident. Some of it was just taking a step off the cliff, hoping that there was a glass bridge there, and trusting that my management has my back, that I can do it sometimes and my organization can do it. Sometimes it was calling up a coworker and having an event session. I believe Kris is on the call here today. Kris Hatz from Environmental Services this year.
You have other people to vent to.
I do. But I call her quite often. She's my work therapist. So no, I wasn't always that confident, and I just trusted my coworkers. I trusted myself. I trusted my management, and we just took one step at a time, iterated, just like Nash said. And it wasn't always perfect. Sometimes I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Well, I figured something out. We're here now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and that's the same kind of thing on our part too. Is I worked really closely with my coworkers, Mike and Carrie, to figure out how do we keep this moving, because this isn't, like Nash said, this isn't project by project by project and some check boxes that we set out a Gov delivery email, and now our work is done. We posted something on a SharePoint site that people may or may not be able to find their way back to. This work keeps going, and we keep evolving and getting a little bit better at what we're doing. And luckily, we have our collab team our unofficial collab team with Mike and Carrie and I, to keep moving this work forward and doing what we can. And I've got all of these champions that I'm able to keep connecting with to see either how I can help them or how they can, have what they need to be able to do the work they need to do in their agencies. So.